Ethical leadership in business and brands can change society and improve people's lives. In this episode, I talked to the Chancellor of the University of the Free State, Professor of Practice at the Johannesburg Business School College of Business and Economics, the Chairman of both Bidvest Limited and SPV Services, Professor Bonang Mohale.
What is needed now is incisive, decisive leadership, which only business can provide. Henry T. Ford realized this that early on when he said we need to make a Model T Ford, a car that our own employees can afford. How many businesses employ women and black people who can't afford their products and services?
I ask him whether brands and by extension companies should have a stance on issues affecting society. We also talk about brand resilience in ever-changing times.
So if you want to make your brand resilient, you must talk to your target market in their own idiom and axiomatic expression. You can't take global ads that don't speak because you don't want to translate, where people just act and then you say they get it. Because people drink beer in South Africa, the black people, for different reasons than people drink beer in Kenya. And all of them are black. If you don't understand that, you are missing the mark. If I don't execute that in my business, I'm missing the point.
This is The Lead Creative. Please subscribe and share this episode with your network. Welcome to the Lead Creative Podcast, where we talk to creative industry leaders, influencers, and brands. We discuss the strategies that influence brand thinking and shape industries. Thought leaders and heads of agencies let us in on some of their thinking and insights. I'm your host, Mongezi Mtati. Enjoy the show and please share and subscribe. Thank you so much for making the time, Professor Bonang Mohale, here. I mean, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I've been following your work, as have a lot of us, I'm sure, listening and watching here today. So it's an absolute honor to have you on. And I think to kick off, one of the things that I'd like to first of all ask you is, growing up in Katlehong, which is near where I grew up, by the way, what were some of the earliest examples that you had to leadership that you believe formed your foundations to where you are in life today?
So one of the things that I learned growing up in Katlehong is that I didn't even know that I was poor because all the houses look the same. And yet some of the people that did better than most were doctors because they lived in the biggest houses, they drove the biggest cars. Those amongst us that could express their wealth would be to have big windows and put a stoop and a gate that closes by itself, not because they had electricity, but because they put a mattress spring so that push the gate and then it will yank it back. But the sense of injustice hit me even that early on. Because if wealth is the inevitable outcome of both hard work and enterprise, then every woman in Africa should be a dollar billionaire. Our mothers were waking up at 3 a.m. to take a 4 o'clock bus or train. They were not back until 7 when it was dark. And up until today, 30 years into democracy, they are still poor.
Very, very interesting and fascinating because, I mean, that's something that you've spoken about quite a lot. And I think now actually to your book, your latest book, Behold the Turtle, where you talk about ethical leadership and the value of ethical leadership in business and society, as it were. Thinking about what you've written in that book and thinking about some of the work that you've done, how can ethical leadership in business help to shape society? Because we often talk about it in politics and see politics as a way that kind of helps to shape society. How does ethical leadership in business, which you talk about a lot, then shape society in ways that the said injustices that you spoke about can be eradicated?
So ethical leadership can be in and of itself. It has to be about a bigger intent. This notion of common purpose, greater good. Ethical leadership can't just exist in a vacuum, because 30 years into democracy, poverty still has primarily a black and feminine face. Therefore, ethical leadership should be able to cure that problem. If it doesn't, you see, learning is experience. Otherwise, it is just information. We must experience ethical leadership, because everybody's quality of life has improved, because we have created holding spaces where the majority of our people can participate, not even to reach their fullest potential, just to participate in the economy so that they can reclaim their self-worth and self-respect. Therefore, ethical leadership in business means business must lead in making sure that this economy looks like us, because business benefited from the 370 years of colonialism, 98 years of separate development, and 48 years of apartheid by paying black people less and women less and pocketing the profits. Now it's their turn to play it forward and to show contrition, to pay some sort of reparation whilst we still work for them. And we're asking simple things. Imagine if business itself can be transformed so that we don't talk about transformation. Tabia Kabin, the chairperson of the Employment Equity Commission for the last 20 years, on the 20th anniversary, says black representation in positions of leadership has just graduated from 14.3% to 14.7%. If the intent is to be broadly reflective of the demographics, it will take us 150 years for this economy to look like us, because white people are only 8.3% of the population. It's not sustainable that 8.3% of the population occupies 67% of the C-suite. It's not sustainable that the top 10% owns 80% of the economy. Other people must also have something to lose. So imagine if business was serious about transformation, they would have more women, closer to 51%, which is the broader representation, not less than 24% that it is. 80% is black people. They'll have black people in the C-suite, closer to 80%, not the less than 15% that it is. And African women is 4%. Business can pay black-owned companies, especially black women-owned companies, in 30 days. They're not even paying them in 30 days. The most progressive should start to be paying them in 7 days. That's when we create the type of society of Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela's dreams, the South Africa we have been praying for. If business wanted to show that it has transformed, it will be full of young people, because it is young people who are not future leaders, but the current crop of leadership, rather than extending contracts of 70-year-olds to stay in their own businesses as consultants, paying them more when they knew upon joining that at 60 or 65, these people will need to retire. They made no plans.
Absolutely.
I mean, business is supposed to be the only one that understands project management, how to deliver mega projects on time, in full, and on budget. And yet they are the ones that are really letting us down. Let me end by saying business is not our second chance. It's our last chance. Therefore, I think a serious intervention is needed to steer business back. Because what is needed now is incisive, decisive leadership, which only business can provide.
Right.
Even Henry T. Ford realized this that early on when he said we need to make a Model T Ford, a car that our own employees can afford. How many businesses employ women and Black people who can't afford their products and services, and yet they want to be sustainable? That's short-term gain, but they're not building this notion of long-term resilience, especially in Africa, because resilience must be much more than the food, water, energy nexus. Yes, our government is doing lots of wrong things. We don't have a stable, reliable, and predictable energy supply, because energy is the fourth means of production. Yes, government is not giving us clean running water. That's why we have cholera. Yes, government is not keeping us safe. But if business was serious, they would be a trusted advisor, a partner of choice. They'll do everything possible in their power to make sure that they make this ANC-led government a capable state, because it's easier to work with a capable state than the one that is not. It's manifestly in businesses' interest to make sure that this country works, because when the country works, they make profit until it comes out of their ears.
I want to just double down on this idea of young leaders and youth leaders, because I know that your commitment is really evident in the fact that you mentor 18 young leaders, or at least at the last time I heard, you mentored 18 young leaders who are just below C-suite and who are in themselves developing as business leaders. So that commitment is really there, and it's evident in the work that you do. What I'd like to find out, though, is what are some of the key differences in approach and thinking that you see among the young leaders that you mentor, as well as, the leading sort of industry leaders that you rub shoulders with on a day-to-day basis? What are some of the key differences that you're seeing, and how can those bridges be built to ensure that what a young leader, emerging leader is seeing and what an established leader sees try to solve the problems of society that you've just mentioned?
So of those 18, 16 of them are women. Only 2 are men. Of the 18, 9 plus 1 are now CEO themselves. And you're absolutely right. I started working with them when they're just a level below EXCO, because those are the ones that were almost execution ready, for a lack of a better word. One of the clearest things that you see when you work with young people, one is that they are fearless. Number 2, that they are curious. Number 3, that they are eager to learn and are absolutely receptive. If you doubt that, look at these last elections. We thought that the electorate is stupid. They punished our once glorious movement, the ANC, by not only bringing them below 50%, but 40%. Yeah. This is an organization that was 72.9%. And the young people are saying, you know what? We are tired of what the rest of the continent has been doing. One, these Uhuru presidents that are in power for 40, 50 years are not good for Africans. 2, that we need the viable opposition to keep the good guys in check. Lastly, because even the good guys left on their own for far too long eventually become the bad guys. And these young people are saying, we are so invested in the future, much more than the people that we are learning from, that we are replacing. And yet they are doing it with such amazing respect, because they accept the difference between knowledge and wisdom. That knowledge speaks, wisdom actively listens. They understand this notion of silverbacks, the people that have been there with a demonstrable track record to learn on their knees, whilst at the same time feeling heard, noticed, and seen, because they want to be respected, loved, and supported. Here's a last one for me working with young people. If we don't invest in young people, the 2 weeks in July of 2021 is going to happen again and again and again, because it's not sustainable that 74.9% then of young people were unemployed. That's 10 million young people that are not in employment, education, or training. That's 6 million young people who don't know their fathers. That is only a part of 30 million. That's half, 62 million South Africans that live below the poverty datum line. That's 28 million South Africans that live on social security, where 10.5 million are on 350 rand a month. I mean, what can we do with 350 rand a month? Now we want to wear it like a badge of honor when our job was to find less than 2 million people on social security. By offering them jobs, we should have reduced that number, not increased it to 18 million and added another 10.5 million people. 28 million of our own people on social security should fill us with absolute shame. And then lastly, I think even in politics, they are saying, please involve us. Please make sure that we also participate, because we don't want all of you to die and then we reinvent the wheel and we start from scratch. And they're saying we want, number one, transformation. Yes. Number two, we want ethical leadership. Number three, we want good governance. And four, they're saying we wanting people who will provide service delivery, because that's what we pay for. South Africa is not a poor country, like Africa is not a poor continent, just poorly managed. It's greed that has gotten in the way. And then lastly, they're saying they want safety and security, law and order. Because without safety and security, law and order, who are we and what are we?
If you're enjoying The Lead Creative, please share this episode with your network and hit follow or subscribe. Enjoy the show. So in very many ways, I see you as the exception to the rule among business leaders who speak truth to power in the way that you do. And in that sense, there's a lot also that's happening across the world. I mean, you mentioned the July unrest in South Africa. Prior to that, there was Fees Must Fall. There are riots happening in Kenya right now. So in very many ways, you see these pockets of people challenging norm in terms of how leadership or society, where those are going, right? You see this. And I'm saying you're the exception to the rule because I don't hear very many business leaders talking about issues that affect society. Why is it that businesses don't take a stance on issues that are happening in society? What is it about business that either makes them step back, or when they see things that affect their very consumers, as you've just put it, business tends to almost sit on the sidelines?
Sure, Monges, you have hit the nail on the head. But also the Arab Spring was led by young people.
True, yeah.
With that self-immolation out of just feeling humiliated, not needed and wanted, with no sense of belonging and ownership. But also because business is afraid to accept an age-old wisdom that says the essence of truth is to let suffering speak. Nobody is suffering in this country more than young people. That because as business, we have benefited from apartheid and we still continue to benefit. You know, in the 30 years of democracy, the people that made the most amount of money are the Jewish people, the Afrikaners, and the Muslim community. One, because they have capital. Secondly, it's because they know how to run businesses. They've developed a system that sets them up for success. Therefore, business is not contrite enough. You see, contrition is an ongoing process. You need to continue asking for forgiveness and be eternally grateful for the mercy shown. Business can't be obsessed with just surviving in the short term, building short-term sustainability without thinking long and hard and profoundly about long-term resilience. Business needs to accept that when they create jobs, they're not doing young people a favor. They're creating markets of the future. People will buy their products and services. Business should not be looking at government and say, oh no, government, you're not giving us the requisite skills. They must grow their own timber because only they know the skills they need today, but also the skills of tomorrow, not just for IR and AI. No, but in agriculture that you don't need metric. Just to be an artisan, a lift mechanic, and a motor mechanic like Germany did, they can grab you from standard 8 and take you to vocational school. And in South Africa, the TVET colleges are the least respected. We have 500,000 jobs being advertised in the Sunday Times every Sunday without fail. And yet we've got 10 million young people that are unemployable because we don't see the connection. Therefore, we must grow our own timber. And as I end, I think young people in Africa, and here I'm talking about 1.4 billion people, almost the same population as China and India, are 35 years and younger. So if we can love this country, we must cancel culture and hold by the hand these young people because they are more than us in numbers, and they must reflect that in positions of leadership, from politics to business to communities. Because we were once young, and in fact, Mandela's cabinet demonstrated beyond any shadow of doubt. Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi was in her 30s when she joined this cabinet. So was Maria Ramos, and so was the ex-chairman of the First Rand Group, Roger Jardine. He was the youngest guy at that time. And I can tell you, history is going to judge us harshly because these young people didn't do too badly, actually. And all of them went on to achieve some amazing, wonderful, good things in life. And yet we are not learning. I think business must stop hiring docile, conforming creatures that can't even say boo to a goose. Kolihlatla Nelson Mandela reminds us of this fact that, you know, you don't negotiate with like-minded people. You negotiate with your enemies. Mongezi.
So I talk to marketers a lot. I talk to heads of creative agencies. I talk on this, on the podcast. I talk to those people who get their briefs from business, who get their briefs, who represent business in various ways or come up with creative ideas to put businesses out there. And time again, I get this sense, anecdotally, that business doesn't want to have a stance on anything that is happening in society. I get that sense a lot, and sometimes I also have to look at work that business sends through, and yet, in your view, you correctly say that business should be the chosen partner of choice in all things society. Why is it then that that we still get this kind of work when we realize, because we are not, we don't live in a vacuum as individuals in business or in this creative space. So how is it that we still get this kind of work? We still have this sort of thing. Is it a mindset change that's required, or is it a thing of it's okay to talk about issues that are uncomfortable, even as a brand?
It's called a political economy because, especially in South Africa, politics has a disproportionate influence in what we do. Therefore, business rightly must be apolitical, i.e., not supporting any party. But when we do our strategic planning, we start first with pastel. And part of that is about understanding the context, because leaders are a product of their own context. Yeah. It's about saying, how is the politics affecting the economy and therefore affecting businesses so that we are either able or not to make money and thrive. That's where it starts. 2 is about saying, as a business, we need to be patriotic. Thirdly, it's about being active citizens, because this country belongs as much to politicians as it does to young people, as it does to labor. but also as it does to business. It's our country. It doesn't matter what you do. If the politics are wrong, there's no way that you are going to thrive. Therefore, business must be saying how to engage, interact, and interface with politicians and demand that it's our taxes, it's the citizens' taxes, it's the workers' monies that you are using. Let's make sure that we bring about a better life for all. We should not be convincing businesses about paying a living wage. They should not be resisting a minimum wage. They should be saying, how can we grow this economy, create jobs in sufficient numbers so that all of us can sleep at night? Because when your neighbor is hungry, you're the one that can't sleep at night, not the neighbor. So I think it's manifestly in our interest to say that which we were taught in Ivy League business schools, to say the purpose of business is shareholder maximization. It's so 70s. Today, we need to say the purpose of business is to survive. Because if you can survive, you make money until it comes out of your ears. We need to say the purpose of business is to ensure that we share the spoils with the people that are participating. It's about saying, how do we ensure that we invest in the future of these young people and therefore in the future of the economy, so that when we look back, we can say we have run a good race, we've done our part. Because all that we are trying to do is to say, can we just create holding spaces to make it possible for all our people just to actively participate in the economy? And lastly, I think we don't even have to reinvent the wheel. We need to say we must build our own businesses as young people, as Black people, as women, to hire our own children. Because it is madness to continue to make babies and then send them to a different neighborhood for them to go down on their knees and ask somebody else for a job. We should be learning from countries like Singapore and Rwanda that learned from Singapore. 12 million people, and yet they've taken themselves out of their own quagmire. And Singapore has only 3 pillars on which the entire strategy rests. Number 1, it's about meritocracy. Number 2 is about pragmatism. Number 3 is about honesty. That's all it is. And they say, if you are a legislator, when you bring a new law to be considered, you must bring another one that we must take off, so that we keep it simple, so that our people absolutely understand. It's about placing our best foot forward. So what can we learn from the Afrikaner, from the Jewish people, and from the Muslim community? Is not to reinvent the wheel, to say of the 10 secrets that they demonstrate beyond any shadow of doubt, just 3 in the interest of time. 1, they ask the question, do you as a family and as a community sit around the table and talk about how to make money? Number 2, do you as a family and as a community buy from each other and one another? Lastly, do you as a family and as a community invest in and refer business to each other and one another? If we did only that, we'd create more businesses rather than what we are confronted with in 2024. It's not even finished yet. 600 companies have already closed. You look at the number of companies in the JSE, 2010, there were more than 400. Today, probably 279. All of them are seeking listing somewhere else. Part of being an active corporate citizen, it's about having loyalty to your own market. It's about saying, let me conquer at home first before I go to London. Most of the companies that rushed to list offshore, they came back with their tail between their legs because they didn't do well in Australia and in London, because they had forgotten that our primary customers are here. More than 90% of the customers of Capitec are Black. More than 90% of the customers of the retail giants, the supermarkets, are Black. More than 90% of the consumers of AB InBev, the old SABs, Lion Beer, Castle Beer, actually Black. But it took them many decades before they had the first Black product manager. Up until today, most of our retail companies are not run by South Africans, let alone by black people who understand the consumer. Is called the seller-buyer diet in marketing terms. They're getting us people mostly from overseas who need to spend 9 months just trying to find out where Soweto is with 3.5 million people. More people in Soweto than in the old South African Customs Union of Lesotho, Swaziland, Botswana, and Namibia, because each of those, on average, has about 2 million people. So Soweto is a country, but we don't treat it like a country, like an economy. That's why we allow these blacks to drive the Mercedes-Benz and the BMWs in Soweto. But when they are involved in an accident, they have to put it on a flatbed, take it to Johannesburg for it to be repaired. Not a single body repair shop that is original equipment manufacturer approved. And yet we talk about the township economy. Yet we talk about transformation. Yet we talk about broad-based black economic empowerment. And yet these businesses are not empowering their biggest market in one township that is called Soweto. We are still woken up at 4 a.m. by the Sasco truck and Blue Ribbon truck that is coming to deliver bread in Soweto. And yet our mothers grew up baking bread every morning. We grew up eating freshly baked bread. Now we can bake that and sell it to ourselves in the same street. They are not giving us those skills and investing in giving us those big ovens to say, you bake it here, partner with us, and distribute it here. But no, we must be woken up every morning at 4 in the morning by these trucks. And we even build supermarkets in these townships, knowing that when we build supermarkets, the world is replete with examples that is going to kill the small shop owners. And we say, Liberty, come and build a supermarket in Alexander. Now they've got 5. And these are not owned by black people themselves that are going to be displaced by these bleak supermarkets. Our politicians, they found industrial hubs around the train stations, Babelegi, etc. Even those died. Now, 30 years into democracy, they're still talking about township economy. And in their mind, when they're talking about township economy, they're talking about small businesses and medium enterprises. When they're thinking of tenders for black people, they are saying we must give the big construction companies the contract to build the N4 to join Pretoria and Maputo. And then after, as an afterthought, to say, oh, what about the poor blacks? Oh, we'll give them a tender to mow the lawn in the island between the 4-lane highways that goes that way and that way. In the same way with companies, when we're thinking about enterprise development, we think in toilet paper, cleaning, and catering. Not about the acquisition of electromechanical things. We're not buying lifts and air conditioners from black companies. Mercedes-Benz in Babelegi is not saying the people of the Eastern Cape and Limpopo know how to keep cattle. If we work with them and teach them how you treat this hide, all the BMWs in the world can have the leather coming from South African companies, because that's where the cows are actually being brought up, tended, loved, and slaughtered. We're not thinking that way.
This episode is sponsored by the digitally led customer experience agency, Roger Wilco. For all your customer experience, digital marketing, and web development needs, go to rogerwilco.co.za or rogerwilco.co.uk. You can also download the South African CX Report and the Township CX Report directly from their website, free of charge. Don't we all love something free every now and again, especially with insights, right? Now back to the show. So what I'm getting out of that a lot is this idea that transformation is beyond just, putting someone of a different race in a position. It's also about transformative thinking within the brand itself, and how the brand and how businesses apply themselves in the market is one. And I think the other is this idea that, for a sort of a phrase that is commonly used, that charity begins at home, that you can't want to go take over other markets before you understand the home market. You spoke a lot about resilience, in fact, or resilient brands. In your view, what qualities make a brand or a business resilient in ever-changing times, and in times that are changing as rapidly as we've just spoken now that, society is changing now with everything that's happening both in South Africa and Kenya, as well as everywhere else in the world?
You're absolutely correct. So if you want to make your brand resilient, you must talk to your target market in their own idiom and axiomatic expression. You can't take global ads that don't speak because you don't want to translate, where people just act and then you say they get it. Because people drink beer in South Africa, the black people, for different reasons than people drink beer in Kenya. And all of them are black. If you don't understand that, you are missing the mark. If I don't execute that in my business, I'm missing the point. When Nando's launched, they will tell you the story. They took everything from South Africa, put it in aeroplanes to go and launch it in Nigeria instead of sourcing it from local. When the launch happened, they cooked and everything. They found that the paper they put chicken in here, those brown ones where they put your 8 pieces, were too small because the chickens in Nigeria were slightly bigger. What an expensive lesson. They had to close the doors again and then go and source locally. If we don't build resilient brands, we will do what we continue to do in this country, talking about black hair products, aspirational to white norms, mores, and folkways. We'll continue to make black people angry because we refer to them in terms that are still demeaning. The way we understand how we have engaged with black people is only as helpers and as gardeners, never as equals, let alone as our supervisors. So if we really want to build resilient brands, we must humble ourselves and see it not just in closed workshops, in our own premises, through one-way glass mirrors and saying we're listening to the market. We need to employ brand managers of AB InBev in Soweto who live in that community, who are in touch with the seismic shifts and tectonic plate moving of the customer needs and demands in their own location. We can talk to you to say, you know what, this ad looks like it's okay, but if we fine-tune it and tweak it here, we think it can really resonate, because marketing is about deeply connecting with your target market. It's how people see themselves expressed in your own products and services. Until and unless we take seriously this market, aspirant market, diamond market, black market, which is not homogeneous, seriously, and we bring young people that are black and feminine and LGBTQI+, and invite them in our companies. And we don't say, come and be assimilated, shape up or sheep out. It's about really listening and saying, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? How can you then inform our strategy and therefore our marketing strategy and therefore our pitch and the products and services we should be designing for this target market? South Africa, again, is alive with possibilities.
What you're telling me actually resonates a lot, because one of the themes that keeps coming up time and time again as a challenge for brands that fall flat in their marketing, and as an issue that people, I don't want to say customers or consumers, that people are always calling brands out on, is this idea of seeing them. So if you see us, you will create products, you will create marketing and messaging that speaks to us. And more often than not, seeing people is actually putting those people in those kinds of positions, so that because they already see themselves, and your brand will, then the messaging will translate. We often have a question that we ask our guests to leave as a question for our next guest. And the guest that I spoke to previously was the CMO of Momentum Metropolitan Holdings, Nontokozo Matonsela. And the question that she left for you was, is marketing ethical? And she asked this off of the back of the...
It should be.
Sure.
It should be. but it's not always ethical. So chakalaka, it's something that is cooked by black people whenever they have a braai. It's a black product. It needed a black product manager who said, I can put this in a tin so that it lives longer and people can buy it in a supermarket. Traditional beer, you and I know, when black people celebrate, it's red meat. We slaughter. And we go to Eila Lane, and that's where we do stuff. And there's always traditional beer, because that's how we talk to our ancestors and forebears. And this was taken away from us and commercialized. And the first thing that the apartheid government did was to make it illegal for our mothers who made it at home. And they put every single solitary one of them next to the train stations so that when our fathers descend from these trains from work, between the station and home is a beer hall. And they had to go there and buy. You know how those beer halls were absolutely full. And biltong. It's a black thing, invention, because we didn't have refrigerators. So if we killed more than we needed at that time, we dried it outside so that at least it doesn't go spoiled and rotten, that it gets fresh air and sunlight, because sunlight is a good disinfectant. With a little bit of salt, we kept it, and it was commercialized. There are lots of products that are stolen from black people with no acknowledgement. I'm not even going to talk about pharmaceuticals. Sure. And companies make money all the way and love to the bank. Rooibos and marula teas in Limpopo, and some of the herbal teas in our rural areas. Not once do brands and therefore companies say, because it comes in your village, how do you ensure that the whole community is involved in its collection and also they benefit? The same with tourism and nature reserves. To create the Kruger National Park, people were forcibly removed. Not just like District 6 and Sophia Town. That was a Sunday picnic. And a park, one of 22 owned by St. Parks, bigger than Israel and Belgium, was created. And people were maligned, and they were angry at this. Now you put a fence, and the only way they can survive is to poke a hole in that fence and then kill a warthog or two, and then they've got meat for a month. The day we bring the community in, we show them how they benefit from tourism. That for each tourist, we can create anything between 7 to 9 sustainable jobs. That young kids in Mondlo, Nkandla, Langanyanga, and Guguletu can wake up in the morning, not think about taxi or train, but walk to a hotel where tourists are being looked after because they see themselves as an integral part of that. Then and only then are we going to make sure that people are connected with the brands. Let me end by saying, you know, the war against rhino poaching is not going to be won in the Kruger Park and in Mhlatuzi and Ezemvelo in KwaZulu-Natal. The war against rhino poaching is going to be won in the East. When you talk to those people about their beliefs and the demand of these rhino horns, that's where it's going to be won. Similarly, the ownership of these brands will be won when you talk to the people who drink the beer, who smoke the brand of cigarette, who use these products and services. When you respect them, when you listen to them, when you see them, when you consult them, but when you make sure that they benefit, like those communities that benefit from tourism, they protect the animals. In Kenya, in Ngorongoro Crater, in the Masai Mara, the lions live in close proximity with the Maasai people and their cows. The elephants pass through the villages and they find a way to coexist because this was their world until we push them into a corner somewhere. When we allow them to reclaim this and they live in proximity with us, then and only then will we say we are winning. We grew up not hearing of young kids being bitten by snakes, and yet we lived in rural areas right in the middle of jungles because our parents knew how to coexist with these snakes. And they would leave their young children here. And sometimes they will see a snake pass next to the little one, on their way looking and searching for rest. We need to go back to give that authenticity of the brands by making them connected to the land, because nature is a wonderful metaphor for business, because everything that nature does never does for itself. It does for others. Nature is not self, but it's the other-centered. That's why rivers don't drink their own water and trees don't eat their own fruits. The sun doesn't shine because itself needs the vitamin D. And the flowers give off this wonderful fragrance, not because itself needs to smell like Fontainebleau, rather than Calcutta in summer when it's hot and humid, 46 degrees on a shade. So the day we respect nature, we respect our consumers, we respect our customers, we respect our target markets, we will make money until it comes out of our ears.
And only then will marketing be ethical, or at least be considered to be ethical. And the second last question to you is, what is the one question that you would leave for our next guest around leadership, marketing, creativity, or their thoughts on life or business?
How can we ensure that we not only create Black businesses or Black women-owned businesses, but that we actually set them up for success?
And then lastly, if you were to ask one question to any living person about their approach to life, business, or work, who would that person be, and what would you ask them as that one question?
I would ask the Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, how did he successfully pivot from being a psychology student to being one of the most highly respected priests and social justice activists in the world?
That's a fascinating question. Prof. Mohale, thank you so much for making the time. It was an absolute pleasure, an enlightening conversation that I know our viewers and listeners will find tremendous value out of, especially the conversations, the parts about brand resilience and the role of brands and business in an ever-changing society, which I found to be really relevant and of this time, and something that will definitely continue to be relevant, because we're seeing these pockets of change and these pockets of upheaval here, riots there, but it's really calls for businesses and brands to change how they lead society and how they help to shape society. Thank you very much for making the time.
Baba ngiyabonga kakhulu Nkosi yami, kuthiwa hayi sandla ingalo yonke sendlula ikhanda. Mina sengiguqe ngamadolo phansi. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you for listening to The Lead Creative. Did you get one insight that's worth sharing from this episode? Please share it with your network or your friends. Pop me some of your ideas and innovative finds on Twitter on @Mongezi. This podcast is available on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also find me on mongezi.com.